And what amazes me is that those opposite actually have an opportunity to participate in debate, but instead they choose to be observers.
The opposition leader did not ask a single question in question time yesterday. He was only recorded once in the Hansard, making a barely audible interjection.
Order.
Now, the Leader of the Opposition's broken his vow of silence today through interjecting about something.
Peter Dutton's silence was perhaps understandable. Labor and the Greens had just announced a deal which gives the government the numbers to pass its so-called emissions safeguard mechanism. The deal significantly ramps up the extent to which heavy carbon-emitting facilities must make real cuts to their emissions in coming years. Labor was happy for a win, which has been endorsed by much of the business sector, except the gas producers. The Greens didn't quite get the all-out ban on new coal and gas, but the deal does put a big dampener on the prospects of new gas projects going ahead because of the costs that will be imposed on projects to reduce their emissions.
We need to act on climate change. I want to thank the crossbenchers who've engaged constructively. It says a lot about the state of the Liberal and National parties in 2023 that in spite of the election result, they have excluded themselves from any participation.
The Greens have secured a big hit on coal and gas. There will now be a hard cap on actual emissions that the safeguard sector can emit.
The government had always just presumed the coalition would support its original, much less onerous changes to a policy which was, after all, introduced by the Abbott government. But no. And when the deal with the Greens was announced yesterday, the opposition leader didn't even seem keen to attack it, instead just sending out his climate change spokesman, Ted O'Brien.
The Labor Party has announced a plan to deindustrialise the Australian economy.
We would have much rather that the coalition was at the negotiating table because we might have got a much better outcome overall in terms of today and certainty into the future.
Business leaders like Innes Willox might have liked the certainty that would have come with bipartisan support for the change, but they were content enough that a deal had been done.
We're still absorbing the detail, but at face value, this is a practical, common sense, workable outcome that gives industry some more certainty on how it can contribute to Australia's net zero ambitions, as well as the 2030 43% emissions reduction target, while at the same time giving industry comfort that it will be able to keep operating, that there is now scope for future investment.
Yesterday's deal is significant because the business community has supported it and the coalition hasn't. It's one thing to be oppositionist about stuff when people outside politics, particularly your traditional supporters such as major business lobbies, want you to be. It's another to do it when those supporters don't want you to be. The coalition seem to have just followed their playbook of the last decade in opposing most things in Parliament since last year's election. But yesterday's deal highlights the shortcomings of that strategy when the dynamics in the Parliament and the electorate are changing.
I think the more interesting comparison is actually with the carbon price package negotiated between Julia Gillard and Bob Brown. They were both deals between Labor and the Greens, but this time they've done a deal where they haven't done a joint press conference. They've done separate press conferences, and both sides have got something, but not everything.
Congratulations, thank you. The fact we were able to reach that agreement shows that we have worked in good faith.
Ben Oaquist was a long-time advisor to Greens leader Bob Brown, so has seen all the bends in the climate change road, from the deal with Brown, which proved a political disaster for Julia Gillard in 2010, to yesterday's deal between Adam Bandt and Anthony Albanese.
There's also a supermajority for climate action in the Parliament. Yes, the Greens are there and they got new people elected the last election based on climate action. We also saw a number of Teals get elected, David Pocock in the Senate. So there's a very different dynamic in the Parliament to that deal.
The supermajority of 2023 may make the coalition look isolated, but it also changes the politics for the Greens and for Labor. Adam Bandt's pragmatism was not universally supported in the Greens party room.
There are undoubtedly political risks on both sides of this deal. For the Greens, they went out hard opposing any new investment in coal or gas, and they haven't got that, although they would claim they've got a step towards that. For the government, they put forward a package that they said they took to the election, and there are some risks if they're, for them, being seen to cause problems for the gas industry in particular.
But there is yet another constituency to placate as part of this ever-expanding climate change agenda.
In the race to repower our economy in the next 3 decades, what happens to the workers and communities who've been powering it for the last 15 decades? In the years between 2013 and 2020, we saw 11 coal-fired power stations close with an average notice period of 4 months. At least 7 more are now due for closure between now and 2030. This situation is urgent and it's only going to get more so. That's why the ACTU and our affiliate unions are being joined by business, investors and climate organisations in calling for the establishment of a National Energy Transition Authority in this year's budget.
The ACTU wants this new authority to coordinate all the government policies designed to help communities reliant on old power generation to move to new industries. It's a sign that while the climate wars are changing, they aren't going away.
We're going to keep having big climate bits of legislation passed the Parliament. It's not the end of it. Climate action and the need to take legislative action in response to it is going to keep going.
Sadly, the climate wars that have beleaguered us for the past 20 years look like they're set to continue, with a lot of both zealotry and Chicken Little attitudes on both the left and the right. We need both major sides of politics to eventually come together to give us that investment certainty for energy and for industry.